네, 안녕하세요. 승승장구 이프로입니다. 오늘 오전에 이어서 리플의 CEO 브래드 갈링하우스의 얼마 전 블룸버그와의 인터뷰 영상 2부 가져왔습니다. 이제 이 인터뷰를 번역하면서 꼼꼼히 보니까 어제 오늘의 우리의 XRP 코인의 상승이 이해가 되더라고요. 여러분들도 영상 끝까지 지켜보시면서 해당 내용 숙지하시길 바라고요. 만약에 일부 영상 아직 못 보셨다라고 하시면 제가 영상 더보기란에 링크 남겨놨습니다. 일부 영상 보시는 걸 먼저 추천을 드리고요. 그리고 내용이 내용이다 보니까 의역과 오역 있으면 안 되어서 영상 만드는데 정말 오랜 시간이 걸렸습니다. 고생했다고 구독과 좋아요, 알람 설정 한 번씩 눌러주시고요. 다른 건 몰라도 좋아요는 꼭 한 번씩 부탁을 드립니다. 여러분들의 좋아요가 제가 영상을 만드는데 큰 힘이 됩니다. 네, 그럼 영상 시청하시겠습니다.
We have been talking here about a big moment for you and for your company, of course, a rollback really of the tensions that had been brewing with the SEC. And let's talk about the next phase. One thing I'm really wondering about now that there's more clarity for you is that is an IPO, frankly, in your future now. We talk so much about the potential for the XRP token to be wrapped in an ETF. That is a method of listing.
Right.
So is listing possible now for you for Ripple?
Well, it's certainly something that is possible. The United States SEC under Gensler was so hostile to this industry. I mean, ironically, they approved the S1 from Coinbase and then sued them for doing the things they said they were doing. So this SEC, fortunately, is going to be, I think, very constructive and positive for this industry. So I think that's available. And I think the company's at a stage where we can consider that. That being said, it isn't a huge priority. I think most companies are going public. Raising capital is something that is high on their radar. We have been in a very fortunate position to be able to grow the business organically. We're also, frankly, more proactive in looking at acquisitions. This is an industry that finally is going to be able to thrive in the United States, the largest economy in the world. And I think the industry is still underestimating the shift from the headwinds to the tailwinds. That's going to make a bigger difference than people think. And finally, the U.S. market is really unlocked.
So it sounds like what you're saying, acquisitions are almost more of a priority now than an IPO for you. So then what would you be looking for to buy, and how big are you willing to go?
Well, I'm not going to name names, but look, Ripple at its core is a blockchain infrastructure company. We sell our technologies to business, primarily financial institutions, and we'll look at other things that are blockchain infrastructure companies. I think there will be consolidation this year. There's a lot of excitement about some of the changes, and we will lean into that for sure.
So when you think about what's possible in terms of financial institutions, there's been a lot of conversation about loosening of regulations and red tape when it comes to the financial industry and its interactions with the crypto community. What are you actually seeing happen? Are banks really warming up in a way that's significant right now?
I mean, I think unequivocally, yes. Just in the last few weeks, I have seen U.S. financial institutions go from being like, look, we're just not going to touch it because we don't want the extra scrutiny of the regulators, which again, may or may not have even been legal, given these are legal businesses. But you have large banks who used to say negative things, now saying positive things. I think the two areas you'll see the most activity in the short term, one is around custody. These are banks that want to be able to custody, particularly when you see real world assets being tokenized. You need to be able to safely manage and custody that for customers and potentially for the bank. And the second is around payments. The global payments infrastructure still remains very dated. Wires are slow. I just had a wire that was sending over euros disappear for 5 days. That's surprising in a world of the internet.
So one part of that payments infrastructure that I'm watching really closely is, of course, stablecoins.
Sure.
There is starting to be more clarity in Washington, and you're seeing people starting to use stablecoins in really interesting ways. I think about Robinhood, for example, using stablecoin in terms of facilitating 24-hour trading. What's next? I mean, if you think about the next forefront of stablecoins now that the U.S. is getting toward clarity, what's possible?
Well, I think we're underestimating how big that might get. Today that market's about $230 billion. So I think some smart people think that may go up 10x in the next 5 years. I think that's probably right. I mean, the two leading players in Tether as well as USDC are both, I think, poised to do well in that market. Ripple launched our own stablecoin at the end of last year. That's already ahead of our own internal forecasts in terms of where we are at this point in the year. Still, we're small, but the goal is by the end of the year for RLUSD, Ripple stablecoin, to be one of the top 5 in the market by the end of the year. And I think the whole market's going to grow dramatically over this year.
So what does it take you to get there? Who are you pairing up with? Are you creating some financial partnerships in order to make RLUSD more of a household name?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even today we had more listings go live for RLUSD on some global crypto exchanges. Anytime you do something new, it takes a minute for that kind of, the pun of the ripple effect of seeing how that plays out. And so we're seeing that happen in real time. So I'm really pleased. And again, as I said, we're ahead of our Q1 forecasts of where we expected to be. So we feel really good about that progress.
Given through what you have gone through with the SEC, I think one major question is how tokens list in the future. What do they mean? How are they classified? Now that you're talking about many other, say even private equity companies looking to tokenize their funds, venture capitalists, Cathie Wood told us yesterday she's considering that for her own fund. What does this mean? What are the rules of the road? Are people going to list and put the cart in front of the horse as they do so?
Yeah. Well, look, I think tokenizing, like what Cathie Wood's talking about, democratizing access to different investment vehicles and different investment types is very compelling. Even, imagine Shark Tank enabling the participation by different sharks. Like, there's some really interesting stuff you could do. Right now, Congress, it seems, is more focused on getting stablecoin legislation passed. That went for markup last week, and I think you'll see that potentially in front of the president in weeks. The other piece of legislation I think will move quickly after that is kind of the market structure bill. Last summer, something called FIT 21 passed the House, did not get through the Senate. I think that a market structure bill like FIT 21 will come before Congress. Hopefully before the summer recess, we'll see that pass also.
But you think about how many exchanges are now looking to loosen their listing standards already on the heels of lighter oversight, and the cart before the horse question. Do you think that people are getting a little ahead of themselves and listing things that shouldn't be listed?
Well, look, I don't think about it as lighter regulation because, frankly, I think the industry wants to be regulated. And what we've been saying for years as an industry is we just want clear regulation. We don't want lawsuits just claiming one thing and the next week contradicting themselves, which is exactly what Gensler's SEC was doing. So I think just the fact that we have an SEC who's trying to work constructively, instead of trying to sue more companies, let's actually work and let's codify and get legislation to provide that clarity.
But again, if you don't have that clarity, what you saw years ago was an ICO boom where tons of things that were raising money never worked out for the people that were buying the tokens or the coins.
Look, I agree, and I said then that I think of some of these ICOs were a lot more like IPOs. They were securities. The problem is the SEC then kind of used that to just blanket and say, Gensler said before he was SEC chair, he didn't think they were securities. And then after he became SEC chair, is kind of his power grab. Gensler wanted everything under his jurisdiction. So I think obviously that ICO boom went away, and there's lots of ways this government can regulate and manage fraud and manage criminal activity. And that did happen. People did go to jail.
I have one more question for you about Ripple and XRP in particular on the supply and how it's managed and the unlocks. Is there anything you would do to change the amount of supply brought to market? Can you do that? How does that exactly work? Because there is a level of dilution for XRP when more supply is brought in on a regular basis.
So this is one of the things I'm glad you asked about, because there's frankly misinformation, sometimes disinformation, people spreading falsehoods out there. The amount of XRP that was created in 2012 when it was first started, when that blockchain was first started, was 100 billion units. That can't be increased. It's slightly deflationary, and now there's about 99.9 billion units. Ripple owns about 42% of that supply. We have had, and for, I guess, 8 years, we published something called the XRP Markets Report, where we share how much we are introducing into the market, because we want that to be predictable. And that has been the case for many years now. And so we will continue to make sure that's very predictable. At some point, maybe we won't be selling as much. We'll see how that plays out in the future. But right now, frankly, we get criticized for owning too much, and then we're criticized for selling some. But we want to do that in a constructive way, which is what we've done for years.
네, 앞선 영상 잘 보셨을까요? 그러면 인터뷰 내용 요약 도와드릴 수 있도록 하겠습니다. 이제 SEC와의 이슈가 해소가 되며 리플은 다음 단계로 진입을 했고요. 현재 리플의 성장 전략은 이제 기업을 상장시키는 것보다 인수합병을 통해서 블록체인 인프라 기업의 인수를 통해 업계 내 통합을 이루려고 하고 있으며 금융기관을 대상으로 하는 비즈니스를 확장하려 하고 있습니다. 이는 이제 리플의 현재 재무 상태가 원활함에 따라서 이제 IPO가 현재는 우선순위가 아닌 것이고요. 이제 금융기관의 태도 또한 변화가 되었습니다. 이제 규제의 불확실성이 해소됨에 따라서 암호화폐 산업에 적극적으로 접근하려 하고 있고요. 스테이블 코인 시장에 대한 것도 얘기를 했는데 현재 스테이블 코인 시장은 2,300억 달러 규모인데 향후 5년 내에 10배가 성장할 것으로 예상이 되며 현재는 이제 테더와 USDC가 각각 이제 1위와 2위를 차지를 하고 있으나 리플 또한 RLUSD를 시장 상위 5%로 목표를 잡고 있고요. 주요 거래소에도 상장이 진행 중인 상황이며 이제 글로벌 파트너십 이제 유럽과 아시아 태평양 지역들과의 은행들과도 현재 파트너십을 진행 중에 있죠. 그리고 이제 토크나 시대 이제 RWA 시장에 대한 이야기도 했습니다. 다양한 자산, 사모펀드, 벤처펀드들이 토크나가 가속화가 되고 있으며 심지어 이제 캐시우드의 펀드도 토크나를 하고 있다라고 했죠. 이제 투자 접근성의 민주화, 이건 민주화가 아니라 이제 대중화죠. 대중들도 기관들을 통해 쉽게 투자가 가능해질 것이며 스테이블 코인의 법안 또한 명확성을 확실히 하여 통과가 될 것이며 시장 구조의 법안 또한 개편될 가능성이 높다라고 얘기를 했습니다. 그러나 암호화폐에 대한 규제가 점점 완화가 됨에 따라 큰 상장에 대한 신중한 접근이 필요하다고도 했는데요. 이 규제를 없애자는 것이 아닌 명확한 규제가 필요하다라고 강조를 했으며 과거 ICO 붐처럼 문제가 있는 것들은 규제가 필요하다라고도 말한 바 있습니다. 그리고 마지막으로 XRP 코인의 공급에 대해서도 얘기를 했는데요. 현재 XRP 코인의 총 공급량은 1000억 개이며 여기서 늘어나지는 않았습니다. 그리고 이건 오타인데 소각이 존재했으며 현재는 99.9억 개가 아니라 999억 개가 남아있는 상황이고요. 그리고 리플 회사에서는 보유량이 지금 현재 42%의 리플을 보유하고 있으며 XRP 시장 리포트를 통해 해당 부분 공급량을 투명하게 운영, 공급은 시장의 부정적인 영향을 최소화하는 방향으로 진행할 것이며 이때까지 해왔다라고 말을 했습니다. 이제 영상에서 가장 중요한 결론은요. 규제의 명확화와 함께 미국 내 시장에서의 성장이 기대가 되는 것이고요. 현재는 IPO, 기업 상장보다는 인수합병을 통한 사업 확장에 집중하는 상태이고 스테이블 코인 및 토크나, 이제 RWA죠. 실물자산 토크나 시대를 주도하려 합니다. 그리고 투명성과 신뢰를 기반으로 XRP 생태계의 성장을 추진 중이고요. 제가 준비한 영상은 여기까지고요. 영상을 보신 후에 여러분들의 생각이 제가 좀 궁금한데요. 댓글로 자유롭게 의견 한번 남겨주시면 정말로 감사하겠습니다. 그럼 저는 다음번에 더 좋은 영상으로 찾아뵙겠습니다. 긴 시간 시청하시느라 수고 많으셨습니다. 감사합니다.